Welcome to the Earthworks Podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joel Simmons, and this is the Earthworks Podcast. And today, we couldn't get a proper guest, so I brought Jack.
Wow.
Well, you know, we had a couple cancellations.
Wow.
But actually, the reality is that's not true.
Who works last minute?
Exactly.
I know. Let's call Jack.
I got nobody. Jack, come on down. We actually planned this because we've had Kevin Hicks on the podcast. We've had Marshall Evans on the podcast. We've had Lawrence Mayhew on the podcast. We've even had Joel Simmons on the podcast. But we've never had Jack Higgins.
So you're saying you've had everyone that works for Earthworks on the podcast
except you. Yeah.
Lisa's been on the podcast.
And Lisa's been on the podcast.
I know.
So everybody's been. The only one we really haven't had, and you should feel good about this, is Kirk Kastner hasn't been on the podcast yet. He's been on the podcast, but not as a proper guest. You today are our proper guest. Your picture will be showing up on the marquee there. So
I can't tell you how much all of this means to me.
Yes, I'm sure you're very impressed by the fact that we didn't have anybody. I mean, that we wanted you to be on the podcast, and so here we have it.
Well, let's have fun with it.
All right, so let's talk about you, and I'll tell the story because it's my story to tell. But we found you at our dear friend John Chassard's place, Lehigh Country Club. John's been on the podcast before you. Actually, only once, I guess. But yeah, John was trying to clear house, so he begged me to. John said you'd be a great guy to have on board. Talk about your time at Lehigh, and what I really want to hear is how you kind of fell into this whole idea as to what Earthworks was doing, because I know John was doing some of it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I guess it's a good question. What is my Earthworks origin story? How on earth did I get going here?
No pun intended.
Yeah. So, like you say, I was at Lehigh, and we were using Earthworks. But of course, I was already keyed into this whole thing.
You have a little hippie in you, I think.
Yeah, this is what I'm into.
Yeah, it's a little
Always
bit.
have been. In fact, I had like what I believe was kind of like a premonition sort of experience about wanting to tie in some sort of Mother Nature focus into my greenkeeping life, early on in my greenkeeping life, before Lehigh. Like so that was at St. Andrews. It was after a shift of walking the links, hand picking weeds with side by side with a gentleman it's St. Andrews, and I was side by side with a gentleman. We had like these kind of like over the shoulder mail sacks on and
to collect the weeds.
Exactly. And he was getting ready to go into a Buddhist monastery where he was taking a 7-year silence pledge.
Who was this?
This was a greenkeeper friend, a guy that I would work with.
The weed picker?
Yeah, his name was John. He was South African. He actually escaped South Africa during apartheid. Yeah.
Wow.
He was a journalist.
Can we get him on the podcast? Oh, he's silent. I'm sorry, we can't do that.
It's certainly
he's probably
over.
Done now.
It's
right?
certainly over, but yeah, he would make for a great guest on the podcast because he was a journalist. He got imprisoned.
Oh, that's cool.
And he got out. And he got out of Dodge.
And he went to St. Andrews?
But went back to Scotland because he had citizenship. His mother was Scottish, and he changed careers and became a greenkeeper.
How long you been with Earthworks?
15 years.
And I've never heard this story.
There you go.
That's that first story you've heard every story of mine 40 times.
That's
and here's one of the best stories I've heard from you, and I've never heard that story.
Well, I saved it for until you asked me to be on the podcast.
So if I'd never brought you on the podcast, you would never have shared that story with me.
That's right. There's more to come.
Oh, great. So we have to do another podcast just to hear more stories.
So that was, I did kind of, it was after that shift that kind of focused my head into, wow, I'd like to, I don't know how it's going to be or what it's going to be, but I want to be able to tie like more of an environmental focus into my greenkeeping. And shortly thereafter, I came I came into this.
And you went to Lehigh. And
That's right. So I went to Lehigh. And
go backwards because nobody understands this. You went to Penn State, and your internship was at St. Andrews.
not exactly even an internship. I mean, it was. I worked summers like all the rest of the student greenkeeper people at different courses, and I worked a summer in baseball once. I worked the in seasons at the Beaver Stadium.
The Beaver Stadium, yeah.
Yeah, that whole athletic crew. We did all those fields, but. Right the day after I graduated, essentially my first job was after graduation was at St. Andrews.
Oh.
And it was a 6-month contract. I was able to go on a student visa, so I didn't need to have like a worker's visa because I applied while I was a student. So I guess
And they gave you 6 months?
yeah, in the eyes of Her Majesty's government, it was kind of a student internship.
Oh,
But
that's cool.
yeah, and actually another cool story about that
That I
is-
haven't heard?
Yeah, no, you haven't heard this because
Jesus.
I remember being told that I would get returned the taxes that I paid to Her Majesty. That's
Really?
right. And
Handwritten note from her?
yes, thank you, Jack.
Thanks,
it
Jack.
was such a pleasure.
Come back
to have-
anytime. Bring your weed bag. And I don't mean it that way, but yeah.
Yeah, the fat sack.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah,
what?
the fat sack. yeah.
Okay, I
bring
got
the,
it.
bring the satchel with that you can pick weeds in.
Okay, got it. So anyway, I was told you'd get the money back, and like 4 years later, I got
Wow.
a check back in the mail
4
to my
years.
parents' house. It took
Wow.
4 might be a stretch, but it was over 2. It was it was to the point where I totally forgot about it.
Well, she has a lot of bills to pay.
That's right.
It's a
So-
very expensive proposition to be the queen.
I mean, there was other stuff to that job that was kind of just shocking. Like, first of all, I got 13 days paid vacation on day one.
Wow.
Like for a 6-month contract. If you were there for a full year, it'd be 26 days paid vacation.
And Lehigh gave you none, right?
No, John was very good.
Yeah,
As are you.
Yeah. I don't give you any. You just take
I just
them.
take them. So
it took 2 years to get your taxes back.
that's right. But I think I got them back maybe in full. I don't know. I don't really know. But I
Doesn't
got a lot
matter.
of taxes back. But so
Handwritten note?
handwritten note. Yeah. Thank you,
Dear
Jack.
Jackie.
Yeah, please come back.
Queenie.
Your greenkeeping skills were
Impeccable.
impeccable.
We haven't seen a weed since you've been here.
Come back and walk the course and
Yeah,
pick weeds.
pick some weeds.
So anyway, no more about that. Yeah, it's just what I'm getting at is like it was a real labor focused sort of country. Like on day one, I got handed 2 pairs of boots, 5 pairs of pants,
Which you still wear, I'm sure.
Probably 5 shirts, 5 jumpers, which of course are like
Jumpers?
sweaters. Yeah, that's
Oh,
like
sweaters,
like
okay.
a sweater, like a sweatshirt sort of deal. This really funky helmet hat thing. Anyway, all that good stuff.
A helmet hat thing.
Yeah, that
Kevin
you were
would like
supposed
that.
to wear. You were supposed
Oh,
to
like
wear
a pith helmet?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would
Pith
be
helmet.
it. That exactly. That's
Keep your head from getting nailed by balls.
bingo.
Yeah.
Bingo.
They
Which-
wore those at St. Andrews?
Well,
The
you
crew?
were, no one wore it. Okay?
Of course, because they're
Very-
hideous.
Yeah.
And they're hot, and they're,
Yeah,
they're,
right.
kind of hideous.
Theirs was kind of cool, but it was still not.
They have
not
logo
that
on it?
cool. It had the logo. It was kind of like canvas wrapped, or like rather like cotton wrapped. I don't know.
That's cool. You still have it?
Yes, of course.
Of course you do.
Of course. So anyway, I was there. It was 6 months. By the time you leave St. Andrews in November, it's like the sun only comes out for like 6 hours a day. It's
A little
kind
bit
of
north, isn't it?
oh my gosh, immensely.
Yeah. What is it compared to here? It's Maine?
Yeah, it's like well north
North
of
of
Maine.
Nova Scotia, yeah.
Probably even north of Nova Scotia. It's really like Norway. I mean, think
Yeah.
of like the top of Ireland. Think
Right.
of like Belfast. That's down more like towards Liverpool.
Yeah.
You know, like it's down in the Midlands of. So Scotland's just way the heck up there. But anyway, so then came back, and John, who I had done the summer with prior, was kind enough to hire me back like in November.
John Chassard now
Yes,
you're talking.
back
Okay.
to Lehigh. Back
Yeah.
to Lehigh.
Yeah, he
So-
said he was a little desperate.
I was certainly, and he was very.
He
kind.
needed bodies.
I needed.
Did you get to
some
use your
home.
weed picking skills at John's place?
No, like I knew that to tie in the environmental thing into like greenkeeping was in the American system, in the system that I was already familiar with, and I had just gotten a bachelor's degree in, and the whole kind of industry that, you know, I'm still in. I knew that it was going to be threading a needle, as they say.
Yes,
You'd have
a little difficult.
Yeah, you really would. You'd have to kind of find the right way to do it and
What
make
year?
it fit in the system.
Are you
This
back?
was I came back in November of 07.
07, okay.
And then I started with you in September of 09.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway. I mean, the industry was definitely different.
Yeah.
It's 20 years ago now, almost.
Yeah, almost. And it really was. It was different. But I did find at Lehigh some glimmer of hope into my vision, into my dream, you know, what I thought I was due up to do. And I had said, I remember saying to him, looking at like the like cases of liquids, like, wow, this is in PA, huh? This stuff, where Martins Creek, where's that? Like, what's going on here? What is this Earthworks?
What is this?
And he was
snake
like,
oil
you
you're
know,
talking-
Joel. He was like, you know, Joel. I'm like, I don't think so. You haven't met Joel? What do you mean you don't know Joel? I'm like, okay, no, I didn't know Joe.
No, I don't think you knew me.
No, I didn't.
Yeah. I just knew you as the guy that walked around with the headsets listening to Grateful Dead and cutting cups
That's
for
about
7
right.
hours a day.
Not much has changed.
Not
I don't
much.
cut cups,
Yeah,
but I
just sit right
but
there.
I still listen.
What was the biggest takeaway from St. Andrews from an agronomic standpoint?
I mean, well, they're growing all fine fescue,
Yeah.
and they don't really spray. You know, they certainly have no disease pressure, and
So no pesticides.
No pesticides.
They spraying fertilizers?
Not even really that
Fish?
that
Kelp?
much. No, not that much. Not that I remember them doing a lot. You know, I really don't remember the spray tank going
Yeah.
out very much.
I mean, that's kind of where fish and kelp meal really
Well,
kind of came from.
I can tell you that story.
There's
That
more stories I don't know?
yeah, I guess.
man.
I mean, that piece that is that so there's some old greenkeeper friends, Andy and Billy, that had been there for 30 plus years at that point. Those guys were probably, I was 20, 21, 22, and they were, I'd say 50, you know, like 30
Really
years older
old.
than me. Yeah,
Yeah,
not
really
so
old.
though that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like not that old, but like
To
had
you,
been-
they were.
Yeah, to me
when
they
you're
were.
22, 50 is really old.
That's right. That's right. Well, anyway, I mean, these guys always called me Brian.
Why?
Okay. Well, it took a while. In my dejection, I was like, man, I've been here for like 4
don't know my
months.
name.
And they still
Is this from Monty
my
Python?
name. No, they called me Brian because I reminded them of Brian May, the guitarist from Queen.
Oh,
I
that's
had
too funny.
wonderful curly hair,
Yes, you did.
down to like my shoulders
Oh,
because
I
I
see.
didn't get it cut while I
Yeah.
was there. So like I was becoming Brian while I was there.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Have you seen him recently?
he's odd silver, right?
He's
Or
still,
white,
it's
white.
still curly
Yeah,
and big.
still awesome.
I think it's a wig now, but it
Oh, it's
still looks
awesome.
great.
Yeah, I'd love it. So anyway,
How long did it take you to realize who they were referring to?
I think it took me saying like, you guys know my name's Jack, right? And I think they told me, which of course you understand every third word
Right,
of
exactly.
Scottish.
Yeah.
Like it's very difficult.
It's very, very brogish.
Just so
Drags.
So anyway, but these guys, and what I'm getting at with these guys and your fish and kelp deal is they told me that they used to collect seaweed off the beaches for making divot mix, and also seaweed that they would compost down. And also crush up shells. They would collect
Calcium.
shells and crush up the shells, mix that in with it, and they would be making, because that was a big thing still at St. Andrews, is making divot mix and divoting.
Oh, cool.
Because of course it's all fine fescue, and
Right.
that's the big what's the big agronomic takeaway from there is that they seed and establish turf a lot.
Yeah,
They do a
have
lot
to.
of
In
that.
that climate with that grass.
Right. So
And
that's
that
like
kind of, they must be getting 1 million rounds.
1 million. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. They just crank them out. You know, you don't stop, and you've got a bunch.
Pebble Beach of Scotland.
Right. And you've got a bunch type of turf that like is not going to creep or crawl. So you got to be seeding and growing and
All the
seeding
time,
and growing
yeah.
all the time. Yeah. And that's what we did a lot of, and a lot of cultural practices. They actually used that hydroject machine. Remember that Toro machine?
Yeah.
They used a lot of that.
But it was all fine fescue, wall to wall.
Wall to wall.
Man, it's too bad they didn't know about Simmons creeper.
That's right.
Yes, that's real.
Yes, that is a real thing.
Talk to the Vista Sea people.
That's
yes.
a creeping sea.
My legacy.
Yes.
Is a creeping creeper.
Your creeper face on a 50-pound
exactly.
sea bag.
But yeah, so that's interesting. What was the soil like? Was it calcareous?
It was sandy. It was.
It's gotta be sandy.
Yeah, it was sandy, and I don't know. I don't know what soil chemistry was like, but I'd imagine that it was kind of. It could have been calcareous, but I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, I remember it to be kind of like just a dirty sand.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's links. It is a sand delta in the kind of estuary into the North Sea. So anyway, that was that.
And you even had one of your coworkers on the podcast.
Oh yes, yeah, I did.
Whose name is?
Sorry, Gavin Neal.
Gavin Neal, exactly. Neal, I was gonna say I remember Gavin. I forgot his last. Sorry, Gavin.
Yeah,
we love you, man. And it was a great podcast. It was one of the more listened to ones, actually.
Yeah, it's cool.
Of course, it's St. Andrews, so everybody wants to hear about that.
That's right, and that was like in the deep depths of lockdown.
Yeah, we were in COVID at that time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is how this all started. Talk about that. How did this thing start?
Oh well,
it was my idea, right?
Yes, of course, of course. Well, I mean, honestly, it did start with some kind of directive from a long time ago, well before lockdown, that was like, we need to provide for the Earthworks community. Yeah. You know, we need to kind of it's already established, but we need to have some structure for it.
Yeah.
Have some structure for the greater Earthworks community. A lot of like dedicated growers that use our Earthworks and follow a biological soil management philosophy.
And that was about 4 years ago. Right now, right? It's about.
That's right. So that's when this
just
started.
About now.
Yeah, it started. It was May. It was like the first week of May we did the first one.
Pretty close to now.
But I mean, long before that, you would talk about that. You know, about how do we? What is it? A Facebook group? Is it this? Is it that? Like,
that's right. I've forgotten that. We were talking about trying to do Facebook groups for certain clientele.
Right.
But this worked out to be so much better. And podcasts weren't the vogue that they are now. 4 years ago, they were just coming into fruition.
Right. I would say that that we really did establish the podcast whole system for really the podcasting of all of America.
Well, we might be patting ourselves on the back just a hair, but yeah, I think the world came to Earthworks first. Is that what you're trying to say?
That's what I was getting at.
And by the way, this is 201. 201st episode is Jack Higgins. You should be honored for that.
Wow, that is the most forgettable
Space
number
Odyssey.
in all of the numbers.
The next one, the first of the next 200.
That's the classic Seinfeld. Remember the Pneumanium?
Right. That's completely insignificant.
Yeah. Did you book? Let me ask you, Newman. Did you book the first New Year's of the millennium? Because that'll be 2001.
Yeah, that would not be the millennium. That's too funny.
Oh, that's good.
So let's talk about Earthworks. I mean, this obviously the podcast has been outrageously successful, and I'm just amazed that we have continued it to the extent that we have. I mean, obviously having Kevin Hicks on there, you and me. We brought in a couple folks every once in a while, and having Lawrence, who I think is probably the most popular listened to. I mean, you and I have gone around recently. I mean, you tell the story of it was a vendor came into the booth at the show. Was that your story or was that somebody else's?
I don't know. A lot of vendors.
So a vendor comes in, a young guy who worked for a competitor actually, and came into the booth and says, Is Lawrence here? I want to meet Lawrence, because he listened to all the Lawrence Mayhew podcasts and he was just starstruck by Lawrence. And he came in looking for Lawrence, and Lawrence doesn't travel with us for the shows.
It's not the only time we get that feedback. Like,
yeah, I mean, he's great.
Those are well-liked episodes, and stuff working with him is fascinating.
It's fascinating.
He's really got quite a expanded mind.
Yes, exactly.
Which honestly, is the intrinsic value of working at Earthworks.
Yeah.
Is
well,
that
look where we started.
we get to expand our minds,
Yeah.
which is
this is
fun as can be.
drug free actually. It's
Yeah,
kinda
drug
good.
free. We
Drug
just
free. Even though we
we're just
believe
trying to expand.
Yeah, we believe in fantastic fungi, but it's not how we're expanding our mind. So you were probably the only one on our team that really knew Jerry Bernetti very well. I mean, Kevin knew him more peripherally as a speaker at Acres and maybe a couple other meetings. I don't think Kirk ever met him, did he? I don't think he did.
I don't think so.
And obviously Marshall never met him, and he worked very closely with Lawrence. But you actually spent a number of years
That's right.
working side by side with him, and he would be in the office on a regular basis, and you'd see the craziness of Jerry. I mean,
and we got to collaborate with him just in general working. Yeah, like we would be on the phone and talking liquids and talking stuff and
talking everything, talking soils, talking the world, talking politics, talking whatever the subject matter was. I mean, it was almost a joke because Jerry could talk forever. I mean, I remember, and I think I warned you many times, and I know Tom Briner has the same stories, who's been on the podcast, but if I needed to talk to him for any length, I would get in the car and drive to Washington.
Absolutely.
Go down to Robert Trent Jones Golf Club and spend a couple days down there. But the trip of 4 hours, I would call him when I left, and I would hang up as I pull into the parking lot, and we would have a wonderful, and it was always valuable. Always.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's really cool, what I think about when I think about Jerry now is, because I only did know him for a couple years, and the last 2 years or so he was quite sick.
Yeah, he was.
But I think about C3 as like it was kind of like his swan song sort of recipe. And it's been such a remarkable legacy for him. Like I would love to have shared in the kind of success that we're having with that product with him. But I mean, it's a genius formulation.
And the amazing thing about it is, of all the products that we have, and they're all very complicated, Jerry's formulas were majorly complicated. I mean, 30 raw materials, and to get that chemistry to work together was magic. I mean, literally there was magic in these. But C3 is the simplest of all the things we've ever done.
I think he really like distilled it down to like what are the key sources that I think would really be synergistic.
Well, and the interesting thing was C3 was designed to be a broadcast product. So we were focusing on small areas. I mean, greens, maybe teas.
You mean prior to
the liquids, the core of the liquids.
Right.
And what I was looking for was a product that we could get into fairways, to help supplement the granulars and fairways.
How do we take this philosophy into the fairways?
So it had to be simple because it had to be less expensive. The whole idea here was there was the agronomics versus the economics. And, so it had to be simple. So, and I've told this story, you've heard it 1,000 times, and I think I've shared it on the podcast. But this was the one time I worked with the man for 30 years every day. My mentor, my dear friend, just everything. I mean, I wouldn't be here without him. And I had gotten this other kelp product that came in from overseas, and it just wasn't working out. And it was a bit of a challenge. And then Jerry comes in and says, "Well, what's this?" He goes, "Well, I just wanted to get a kelp product to put on fairways," and he ripped me up. It was up in my office in Martins Creek. He ripped me up and down.
This was all around the time I came on.
Yeah.
This was like, because my first days of work was repping that kelp product, like as like the new product.
Oh, that's right. I forgot that.
Yeah.
So, he, and his whole story, I mean, it was screaming and yelling match. I mean, and Jerry and I never had that relationship. It was a very, very productive business partner, friendship relationship. But when he saw what I was trying to do here, he ripped into me because that was linear. And that's where that phrase came from. We don't do linear products. We don't do single element, single material products. And I literally took, and I can show this for those of you watching. He took this notepad and just sat there in front of me, and that's how it came about. And it was like, oh, well, that's
so let's do
brilliant.
that.
That's just brilliant. And today, I think it's 40% of our liquid sales.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe
it's
more.
Huge. It may be more, and it's hugely successful for all sorts of growers. That's the real
Across the
legacy
board.
that I like. Across the board.
Easy.
It's not just a fairway product at
No.
all, and it's not used that way at all. Like it's being used by arborists, by landscapers, by
Arborists love it. I mean,
love
we
it
have
as
that
a tree
picture of that
product.
holly
Love it.
in our slide set, and it's amazing what it can do to bring back trees, shrubs, anything that's just really taken a beating. Salts, whether winter damage, whatever it might be. But
Yeah, cost effective and easy.
and now we're moving it by the tote, which I never even dreamt we would ever do. And we have one of your better clients and dear friends over in Long Island. They have 17 totes.
Yeah, I know. They're waiting
I
on
know.
their full
I know.
truckload of totes.
I talked to them today, but yeah, I mean that's just amazing, and of course it's very cost effective in that manner. But man, it was a great story, and like you said, I think it is Jerry's swan song, his legacy in one way. I mean, the whole formulation, and it was funny when I started with him. Our first product was Kick, and it was designed to be a soil conditioner. 545 was built, designed to be the fertilizer, and that's what we were going to take to the lawn care business that we were trying to build. And Kick was designed to be a true soil conditioner, humic acids, surfactants,
Like a wetting agent.
a wetting
really.
agent, a lot of
Yeah.
wetting agent in it. Well, there's a lot of wetting agent in all these products.
And I'm sure, in 1990 when you were first selling this product, that's kind of the way you would sell a soil conditioner.
Yeah.
Like, what's this product going to do for me?
It had to get into the soil, so we had a lot of surfactants in it. We had 3 or 4 different surfactants: ammonium lauryl sulfate, even yucca, and other things. Coconut oil was in some of the original formulas. And although we had a lot of pushback on coconut, wasn't that what I used to put on my skin in the sun when I'm on the beach? Well, so isn't that just going to burn the plant? No, it's a
Take it easy.
surfactant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just take it easy.
So these are things but that was the first product that went out there, and it's a very complex formula. And now it's even more complex because Lawrence has taken it and tweaked it and added a lot more humic substances to it, and it's just been wonderful. But C3, man, it's the simplest thing we have and the biggest, most powerful bang for the buck, and just working everywhere you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you've done, 5 or 6 different either podcasts or turf talks talking about worm suppression.
Yeah, about the cat suppression,
And we still don't really know.
Yeah, and we're only just trying to make that better. Like that's because the nicest part about that is that unlike other methods, you don't have dead worms, which
Right.
is a
Yeah,
mess.
which is good.
Yeah. So
And that was a complete surprise. We had no idea this was going to happen. And you've heard the story, and you probably had the same conversation. Does this stuff kill worms? And I'm like,
I hope not.
oh my God, I hope not. Yeah, well, better not. And when you run a business as long as we have, it's like every time you hear something like that, it's just pure paranoia. It's like, oh my God, what did we do now? What happened now? We're killing worms? No, we're not killing anything. We're just keeping the bug, the poop from coming up to the top.
Yeah, I mean,
Kind of cool.
that is kind of might be some interesting insight to share. Like, what is it like on the day in to day out of maybe would we call it putting out fires, dodging, incidents? Like, what's it like? Some insight for the dedicated listeners.
I mean, it's 37 years of intensity, really, and I think back.
It's nonstop. It really
It's never-
it's high.
yeah.
It's high tension.
It's a
and
lot of pressure.
a lot of pressure
Yeah.
and non-stop motion.
Non-stop motion.
That's what I'd call it.
I thought about that this morning because I started my day with a couple phone calls, drove to the accountants, met Lisa Kiefer, our general manager, did some work there, did an interview because Lisa's going to be leaving us soon, and then went to meet with our vendor from Jerry's company, who makes our liquids, and then came here and recorded a podcast with you.
I bounced. I mean, I was out in Long Island this week, and then today I did a couple of stops up in North Jersey, bounced back down here. Set up, do the podcast, like
I mean, what have we done in terms of academies this year so far? A dozen?
At least.
At least. And I've got five more in the next
books.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then the academy season will slow down because everybody's back to work soon. But that the academy is, you've been very involved in it and you've really started to participate in it. But that's been another huge success for our company. And basically it was what I taught at Rutgers for those 10 years. But it gives us an opportunity to help people understand the why of what Earthworks does. And and it's so ridiculous to me that so much of this pushback we get from the industry about, my favorite new one, and you've heard this, is, well, we put carbon fertilizer down and we tested the plant. We didn't see any more carbon in the plant. Well, that's because we're not trying to feed the plant carbon. We're trying to feed microbes carbon. And so that's what the Academy does. Is it helps people understand the value of biological soil management. And as you've heard me say, my days are starting to come to, closer to the end than the beginning. Your days are still strong. I want the concept of biological soil management to continue as the legacy of what we've done, because that's how we're helping people. We're helping people understand that the soil works because of the microbes, and if you create an environment for them and you feed them, everything in your life is better as a superintendent or a grass grower, or a landscaper or lawn care operator, or even a home gardener for that matter.
Yeah, it just makes you successful. It makes the plant successful. It makes it fun. And it's really it's the right way to do it for so many reasons. And
the cool thing about this is that we don't know anything about soil biology.
It's not, and that's kind of cool.
It is kind of cool.
I agree,
because we're always learning. I mean, look at rhizophagy. We didn't know anything about rhizophagy until 3 years ago. I mean, rhizophagy we've talked about on the podcast. It's the concept of the symbiosis between microbe and plant, how they come in and go.
This cycle of the microbes going into the root and out of the root, and that true interface between microbes and the plant.
And of course, the best story of rhizophagy is you sitting in the office playing with cutout colored paper, and I'm like, Jack, what are you doing?
What?
Shouldn't you be talking to people or working? I am working. I'm talking about rhizophagy. What the hell are you talking about? And you're sitting there studying, and obviously you caught fire in your head and you just went with it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I've learned since then to let you. I buy you color paper.
Yeah,
and you cut out little things.
Look at all this. I mean, we don't skimp when we have a good idea.
Right.
On setting
paper.
up, on setting up it in a nice way. I mean, we're sitting here right now from the Earthworks studio.
The Earthworks studio.
And we've got like a whole nice setup to record these nice podcasts, and we try and do them in the best, like in the most professional and highest quality manner.
Yeah.
Like, because that's what makes that's the way we do things.
Yeah, I mean, we learn. I mean, we're constantly learning, and like I said, listening to Lawrence every week or as often as we do, it's just it reminds me of my days with Jerry. I mean, I would spend hours talking to him, and every single time, 30 years in, I'm learning something. Mm-hmm. And he was constantly reading and studying and learning and finding new ways to do this, or what he did with chemistry was amazing. And Lawrence is a studied and practiced chemist.
Yes.
And Jerry was miles ahead of him, and he was just so intuitive, but he knew how he could create these chemical relationships in the product, because again, most of our competition, the liquids are 3 or 4 simple products with maybe a humate or maybe a piece of kelp or something like that. Jerry's were not. They were, some of the stuff that we have in there, I had no idea what it was. And of course, this because I think you saw it, but he would always taste everything, which was just weird as could be. But, he needed to know
saltiness.
He needed to know exactly. It was, he could tell acidity. He could tell saltiness. He could just fine tune something. And then he was able to make it happen. And still to this day, I will contend what he did in formulation is 10 years ahead of its time. Right. Sitting here.
Sitting here right now. Yeah, exactly.
But it's good. So let's talk about this. The industry, we're on fire. We're exhausted. Usually I'm done by, the New England show. Mm-hmm. I got another, 4 weeks of run before we can start to breathe. High. And 5 new distributors this year. Lots of people calling us. Lots of people telling their success stories. And I'm not saying that to brag about Earthworks. I think what that is the entire industry is starting to understand that biological soil management exists, and it works, and it's making their lives better. And that's from the smallest little inputs to the guys that, we've got a tremendously loyal client base, and these guys are, just starting to realize that, man, their inputs are less.
Yeah, their inputs are less. It's not more expensive, and it is just so clearly the best way to grow plants, in connection with nature. That it's not like rocket science either.
And that's Lawrence's take. He's always trying to balance everything to work the way Mother Nature works.
That's
so
right.
That
We're
everything
trying to
can be taken up.
Mimic those reactions and processes. In our approach.
One of my favorite conversations with Lawrence that you and I had on the podcast, the three of us, was when we started talking about that whole 17 essential elements, and we're putting out 90 minerals, and the plant's taking them up, and Lawrence had a
Arnon and
really,
Stout, was it? Arnon and Stout.
37 or something, hydroponically. And still that's a model that is held by academia, and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. And obviously the plant's taking up all these little pieces of mineral that they then pull together to create amino acids intracellularly. And you're starting to see true research that's justifying that and proving that. And I think that's what we really have done, is we brought that to the table, at least functionally, even if it isn't, academically, we brought it in functionally. So all these products have all these little elements, so the plants bring everything up and they're healthy.
I like how transparent we are with that as well. Both those full analytical reports from the what is that,
Mott's Labs, they did, it was C3.
It was
and they're on our website.
It's C3
70
and
plus
it's
minerals.
343.
And we have 343,
yeah,
right.
So, you see, it's 70 plus minerals on both of them.
Yeah. And that's the one thing, if anybody were to ask me, what's the one thing, there isn't a one thing that Jerry gave me, but the one thing I would probably highlight is that he was so focused on remineralization.
That's what the Renovate Plus product is.
That's how that came about.
That product is all about remineralization.
And 545, same thing. And the fact that we're using an egg layer compost, and they feed these birds with such a dense food of minerals, because they're trying to keep the birds healthy for obvious reasons, and they're trying to build shells, the egg shells. The mineral density of the feed that they give these birds is intense, and 85% of it, falls out the back end, and we put it in a bag ultimately after we compost it. So we've got this mineral dense product, and that's why Jerry was so adamant about, we're going to use egg layer compost. You've heard me say this, but I'm a punk kid who doesn't know anything about golf, doesn't know anything really about much of anything. Certainly didn't know how to run a business, and we go to a manufacturer in central Pennsylvania, and because of Jerry's relationship, this young buck and Jerry walk in with a new company, and they give us credit, and they built product for us, and it was this mineral dense. It was 545, but it was dusty and ugly and hideous, but it worked because of all the formulation that Jerry put in and the minerals that were in it, and the liquids, have really followed through with that. 70 plus minerals in all those liquids.
Yeah, it's really awesome. And I guess what's important about all of this is that with the rising tide and people becoming more aware, and there being more organic products on the market, there's a lot of organic is management, is waste management.
It's mostly waste management.
In fact, it's very good point. And that's really dangerous.
Yes.
I just heard about a product that is actually sawdust and manure. I'm like, wait, it's sawdust and pig manure?
Oh, it's pig manure.
It's sawdust and pig manure.
So a bad manure that's gone through a different digestion process than a chicken, and sawdust, which will basically steal nitrogen from your soil.
And in fact, that was like how it was uncovered. It was like, why is everything getting chlorotic? Like after using heaps of this stuff in a construction project, like what's happening here? Oh, you mean we just laid a bunch of sawdust down?
We put a very carbonous material on, and the carbon to nitrogen ratio is going to go backwards and steal all the nitrogen.
Bingo.
Yeah, it's just amazing. But quite honestly, to be very honest, even what we were doing is somewhat of waste management.
Of course.
Working with Rose Acres, they needed to get manure. But we went to them and created a solution for our business partner who generates 1.4 million dozen eggs a day and had to get rid of the manure. And now they realize that even just straight field applications of raw manure is not healthy. They want everything to go through the composting process, so everything is digested a second time, and a lot of the potential liability that could be caused by spreading it in fields.
That's right.
It's gone. And so, we've worked with them closely, and we're finding partners that are taking more and more of the raw material. We're getting more blenders. I mean,
it's all great. It's all great stuff. I mean, but what we've done particularly well is make this product good and easy to work with and fun and fine to work with. It throws like a regular fertilizer, and,
now talk about stress.
oh my gosh, because sometimes it screws up. That means it does. Sometimes it screws up.
Well, not even that, but before we got to that point, it was a mess. I mean, I'm trying to get my friend Rick Kroc here on the podcast, and he's a busy man, so that's why you're here today, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
So, thanks, Rick. But Rick was at Fiddler's Elbow when we first started, and as I've told the story many times, that was the first place that we ever did it in New Jersey, and Rick was the guy spreading it, and it was literally, he was up to his chin in dust and manure and humic acids, and he would walk around trade shows that I was standing at, and he would say, "Don't listen to anything Joel's saying. I'm suing his ass for chicken shit at doses."
Yes,
because he breathed a lot of it for those years. I mean, and it's a running joke. I've heard this so many places. Oh my God, it's Earthworks Day. All the crew guys would scatter. You probably did this at Lehigh. Earthworks Day. Call in sick or this.
I'm the pace man. I was actually one. I can't tell how much they're serious and how much they're actually busting my stones about my ability as an operator, which it's mainly serious. I wasn't a great operator, but I was very consistent on the spreader. I could pace it out, and
they called you pace.
I could dial it in down to the pound, baby. I had good pace and good spacing, and so I put out a lot of Earthworks. Like I really did. You would get it in between your toes on the.
Well, when you're wearing the flip flops like you're wearing today, that's probably what you were wearing. I'm sure John.
Come on, man. There's a code with the desk situation. You don't talk about what you're wearing underneath
the pants.
The desk.
We do have pants on.
Come on.
But it's it's been entertaining, all the stories that we've heard over the years. Some good ones and some scary ones, and. There's some hairy times in any business's story, but when the movie comes out, I'm sure it'll be entertaining.
I mean, we just have a great time. I love doing this. Like I get out of my car today and I'm buttoning up my sweater and like hearing the birds on the trees outside. I'm in the superintendent's shop and like. Yeah, smelling the early smells of spring. Then also, I had a great lunch today with my buddy James Sirico, who's been on who's been on the podcast, North Jersey Country Club. And
that's a good story.
Yeah. So
that's a great podcast. Listen to that one.
Yeah. James and Danny.
Yeah,
Danny's
that was a great podcast.
So anyway, we went to lunch and we walk into this Mexican restaurant, and I'm like, this is definitely the sort of place that would have mariachi. Like this place is screaming mariachi, because we used to at Lehigh I used to go once a month. The crew guys and I would go to mariachi night at Fiesta Olé in Emmaus. It was great. And so anyway, today at lunch I had said this to James. So we're finishing up our lunch, and I'm like, dude, look in the lobby. And the only other table there was a big birthday party, like maybe like an 80th birthday party or so,
great.
And so they were setting up for the birthday for grandma's abuelita's birthday party. Yeah,
happy birthday.
And it was great, and there were tears. It was like a real emotional. It was really nice. And James was like, dude, you willed that into happening.
So what you're telling me is you spent all day drinking margaritas and hanging out with a buddy?
If you know me, you know I don't drink margaritas.
That's true.
And
so they had Guinness on tap?
No Guinness at the Mexican restaurant.
So let's talk about. Here's one of the things that's come up, and I think it's one of the frustrating points of the week. we're trying to get, every state has its own uniqueness about the way they look at products.
Okay.
And we got nailed by a particular state who shall remain nameless, and you would think they would be very open to organics, and they apparently aren't, because there's somebody with
Kentucky.
That was the first really bad state from regulatory standpoint.
I remember,
but
actually.
what happened was they tested the humate in one of our liquids, and we put in 4%, and it comes testing out at less than 1%. And we talked to Lawrence, and he goes, "Well, it's going to do that because
It complexes.
it complexes, and then it can't be separated. So you can't.
That's the whole intention.
You can't
of humate.
identify the humate." So we're going to have Lawrence on and talk about this in the next week or two, because this is an issue. I mean, Kevin and I were talking. He goes, it makes us look like we're snake oil salesmen again. I mean, not we ever were. But when the state comes and says that, and then they don't take into account the fact that this is a chemical reaction,
and it's doing exactly
what we want it to do.
Humans are supposed to do. It's exactly the reason they're in the
why
formulation.
they're there. Yeah. And they're still extremely effective as a humate. And again, a humate, as we've talked many times, is a structural entity. It's an architecture. It helps create, an environment for microbiology, which is what the starting foundation of biological soil management is. But these silly little things, it's just like, somebody saying that we put carbon down and we didn't see it in the plant. I mean, this is what we've dealt with for 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
One of the ones before your time, but I know you know it, one of our favorite USGA guys used to say, "Well, why would you put that down? That's just ash, and you don't want to have ash." And I remember the first time I heard the story about ash, and our dear friends at RTJ would call me Ash Boy for years. But the ash thing was like, what do you, it just blows my mind. I didn't even understand it. I'm like, and I actually ended up talking to Norm Hummel at Cornell, and I said, "Norm, can you help me understand?" He goes, "Well, the ash is the mineral portion." And I'm like, "Oh, well, of course, that makes perfect sense. You burn a log, you get ash, and what's the ash? It's the mineral. It's the stuff that's
all
not
the
carbon that doesn't
burns.
burn
Yeah.
off." So and I'm realizing that, yes, we are putting ash down because it's the mineral.
Man.
It's the ash man.
Yes.
I hope that doesn't take off.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but again, goes back to some of the things that we've gone through over the years. I mean, we've been called every name in the book. I mean, things that I can't say in public.
Worse than Ash Man.
Much worse than Ash Man. But so what's the future? Where are we going? What are you looking at? When I'm gone and you're still doing this thing, where are you going to be in 5 years, 10 years? Where's the industry going to be? Where's carbon-based fertility going to be? Where's biological soil management? You guys going to be able to carry this torch?
I really think we're going into a phase, and we're creating a time when this is the standard. Period.
Yeah.
Like that's where we're headed to.
Well, I'm biased, but I would hope that's the case because it works. I mean, even the conversation, we've had this a couple times last week. I spoke with Glenn Smickley about this on the 200th.
Jay said it too then.
Yeah, base saturation, it works every time on high CEC soils. But these are all the foundation pieces that get together. But there's so many. I mean, I really feel bad for grass growers because they listen to somebody and it's a different story. It's a different story. Here's the new agronomic philosophy. Here's the new one. Use less and don't worry about it. So just, cut your lunch in half and assume you're going to have enough calories to survive. I mean, it baffles me, and I'm tired, and you're going to take it and run with it. And when I'm 80 and you're having a Mexican birthday party with in the place
the mariachi.
with the mariachis, I'm gonna please don't do that. but the big guitars would be fun to play.
Oh yeah.
So again, what's it going to look like? I mean, what do you think you're going to say? Obviously, the industry is going this way. The Andersons are talking got carbon. You're talking. There's not. I say this at the academies now. There's not. We could have a group of 200 superintendents in the room. There's not one superintendent in that room that doesn't have something on their shelf that isn't carbon-based, that doesn't have a humate or a kelp or a fish or some molasses or whatever carbon that's designed specifically to feed microbes. It's there. We're here. It's now. It's not. It's not a future.
I think we're there in the golf industry and the fine turf industry.
Yeah.
And what I think will happen is that this we're leading the way for that to become a standard for all fertilizer users. I mean, I think it's happening in ag at the same
I
time.
was just going to bring that up. I mean, if you listen to the sustainable ag people, that's really the cutting edge right now.
Yeah, it's happening.
And they're
them.
coming out. I mean, I'm hearing Jerry's voice from 30 years ago in the conversation today in sustainable ag. If you watch the movie Kiss the Ground and its sequel, Common Ground, the sequel, I mean, it really talks and shows the stories of how these people have changed their businesses and changed their lives and obviously changed their soils. And, I got a T-shirt from Kiss the Ground for Christmas, and it says, feed the soil, feed the world. And it's, sustainable or regenerative agriculture has been promoted by USDA now. They're pumping tons of money in it to sequester carbon, your favorite subject that I'll let you have
that's what
the
I want.
platform. And, I mean, it's definitely here. And they've always led the way. I mean, Jerry was sustainable agriculture, and, he allowed me to bring it into the T&O industry, which I didn't think was going to be this difficult. But I think we've had some, the folks that get it, they just love it, and they live it, and they'll never go back. But
I think if they really love it, then they should come right over here to the Earthworks studio, and we're about ready to record like a "We Are the World" style.
I like that. We could get
video.
the guitars out and we got a band here at Earthworks.
Get the risers out.
We could get the risers, and we could all sing a big
get the swag
carbon. Let's not do that. But yeah, that would be kind of cool. I mean, that's another thing we should say while we're here on the podcast is if you are interested in being a guest here on the podcast and have some passion for what we're talking about, let us know. I mean,
yes, we want you on.
We want you on. It's
because this one counts as one of my podcasts, by the way. So you won't.
I'm the host.
Yeah.
No. I'm the host.
No more no nasty grams next week saying you need to get a podcast done.
Well, I'm traveling next week, so you have to get one next week.
Great.
I think we're going to get Lawrence back pretty quickly because I want to have this conversation about humates again.
And I like that we do I like that we get guests that are specialists in some specific field. I like that we get guests that are users and customers. I like that we have a variety. It's really cool.
I mean, I think we try very hard not to make this a big sales pitch for Earthworks. Obviously, we talk about what we're doing because it's our passion. Kevin's wonderful at that. I mean, he's actually talking about bringing his son on, who went through almost went through pro baseball and the lifestyle that brings. I mean, it's an interesting story talking about how how the whole industry can change one's life, which is kind of cool. So, and he's had professors on, and he's had seed people on. I mean, he's had some great very non-Earthworks people on, but talking about the same conversation. And it really does show that the industry is kind of coming. And when you really boil it all down, even the base saturation crap, when you boil it all down, we're all kind of saying the same thing. We're all trying to get the soil to work for us. I
mean, the base saturation thing is so simple. It's just simple. It's simple. We just are trying to get more oxygen in the root zone. Okay,
it's physics.
That's it.
It's the three-legged stool.
And if you're dealing with like a soppy, moppy clay, then you're looking for some solutions. Yeah. And if this provides solutions, i.e., do the soil test, see if you need lime, and use the lime if you need it, and it'll get better. Like, there's nothing controversial about it.
I mean, this is what's kept me going for all these years, is that, I love introducing the concepts and the products, obviously, but the concept more than anything, to a new superintendent who may or may not be a believer or has never seen it, and then he calls me up like a year later and says, "You won't believe this." And I'm like, "Well, actually, I will, because this is kind of how we present it." But it's wonderful to see their face. It's wonderful to hear the excitement. It's wonderful to hear the stress coming off their shoulders, because they're not coming in every day thinking, is this green going to be alive, or is it going to take a dive today? I mean, it's helping people and preaching and doing some stuff. And, we've done some good things, and we've had a hell of a lot of fun. We've been to a lot of cool things. So you and I will be at the PGA tournament, which we're a sponsor of, out in Valhalla. And you and I will be at the Women's Open in Lancaster with our dear friend Josh Saunders, who's been here on the podcast very recently. And
Campfire
the first
Story
one,
Times with Josh.
Yeah, exactly. And he'll be back. I'm going up to the Senior Open up in New England, where Tom Irwin has been a big supporter of, and Earthworks has been there. So, I mean, those are kind of fun. You and I and the whole team were out at the President's Cup last year at Quail Hollow with Keith Wood, a former student of mine, and
we get around.
One of the best. So, I mean, we heard the story, what does Daddy do for a living? Oh, he just goes out golfing or out to the Mexican restaurant with his friends and drinks dark beers all day. And that's all we ever do.
It's wonderful.
But it is good. So we just did an hour just sitting here, and this was all about me. I mean, all about you.
Yeah, I know. I you know what? I like to have some level of mysteriousness, so like I'll remain this kind of veiled guy. He tells like these kind of enigmatic stories here and there
that I've never heard, which I think you might have made up.
Yeah.
But,
and we'll just leave it at that because, in reality, we say you haven't had me on the podcast. In fact, I'm having you on the podcast.
I don't think so. Your face is going to be on there as hosted by Joel Simmons. This has been fun, though. I mean, the podcast has been fun, and I've learned a lot, and you've learned a lot, and we've had some laughs and and a lot of good things. Let's end this by talking about, because you're wearing the shirt, but Earthworks for Home. I have had recently a number of people saying, "Oh, I saw, who's that Jack guy? He's very funny, and you're good with him." And we do these goofy little. If you haven't seen, Earthworks has now put out an e-commerce division called Earthworks for Home.
I mean, let's talk about why and how and why and what's going on there. It's really like, we say it's e-commerce, it is, but it's really
beyond that.
It's beyond that, and the demand was there. That's what this was being driven by demand from some homeowners, some dedicated, some enthusiasts,
even some golf course superintendents who are having members come down and steal bags of 545 or something from them. So
and also it also comes from a desire from our part to say, you know what, we're experts in this field. We're experts at this, and if there are, if there's a demand in the retail space, we're a voice that deserves to be heard.
Yeah. So
like we want to have some representation there, and so we do. Yeah. And what it's really been great for is, I mean, it's another marketing piece for us. It's another way of getting out in front.
It's a parallel market. It's wonderful.
Right. And getting out in front and letting the homeowner, the enthusiast, aware that, yes, no matter what, you can access Earthworks.
Yeah.
There's
fairly easily.
So it's available to anyone in those 25-pound bags and those quart hose end bottles.
Right.
And it also opens up people's eyes to being to our distributor partners as well.
Right.
If they're nearby to a distributor partner, they can find the Earthworks products there as well. So, but they would not have been keyed in and aware of that if it weren't for the community that we're building with the Earthworks for Home.
And
products.
it's been fun. The community is I mean, I'm every night I probably answer 3 or 4 emails from homeowners about, and you can see they're sponges for information, and they're excited about it. And this is the one place in our market that we actually use the word organic, because we're really not about being organic. We're about being carbon-based, and we're about changing the soil, making it better for biology. But in the homeowners world, they use that word, and they want to have a safer environment, but they really want to have a really good lawn. And at the end of the day, that's what biological soil management does, is it creates a really, really good lawn. It keeps them green through the summer, green deeper into the season. They come out of dormancy earlier. It's been fun.
You can't screw it up.
Yeah, it's hard to mess that up. So if you haven't seen it, it's Earthworks for Home, the number 4home.com. And there's a whole bunch of Jack and Joel stuff, and we've continued to do goofy little things. But it's been kind of fun. So let's end this little thing, since we've been doing this now about an hour, and like I said, this is the 200th episode, and 201st episode, excuse me. So thank you for coming down to the studio, Mr. Higgins. This is your swan song for the podcast that I am hosting. And
Okay.
And you're having some technical difficulty, aren't you?
I don't know.
Let's hope not. But let's just say goodbye to everybody.
Okay.
How about
So long,
that?
all.
Please tune in next week. Maybe we'll have Lawrence Mayhew on. I'm not sure, but let us know your thoughts, and if you want to be on, please do subscribe to the podcast and join us again next week, because we will be here for the Earthworks podcast. Thank you, Mr. Jack Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. So long.